found the transmission on a Tuesday buried in a server room that shouldn't have existed. My name is Hollis Brennan and I worked for Archival Solutions Group in Pasadena, about 3 miles from JPL's main campus. We handle data migration for government contractors, boring stuff. The kind of job where you spend 8 hours moving files from degrading tape drives to cloud storage, watching progress bars inch forward while you think about lunch. The Tuesday that changed everything started like any other. I was assigned to Building 7, Sub-Level 2, a server farm they were decommissioning. The smell hit me first, ozone and old electronics, that particular scent of technology from before I was born. Rows of tape drives stretched into the darkness, their indicator lights long dead. My supervisor, Daryl, handed me a clipboard. Migrate everything to the new system. Don't open any files, don't read anything, just transfer. Classified stuff? Everything down here is at least 40 years old. Most of it's probably weather data and trajectory calculations. He paused at the doorway. Buildings scheduled for demolition Friday, so whatever you don't finish gets buried. I started working through the drives alphabetically. Most contained exactly what Daryl said. Decades of atmospheric readings, satellite telemetry, supply requisitions, mind-numbing. I was on my 3rd energy drink when I found the one labelled PTP83. The tape was different, newer. Someone had replaced the original housing with a modern casing, but kept the vintage label. Like they wanted it to blend in but couldn't bring themselves to completely destroy it. I violated protocol, I opened it. The files were triple encrypted, but whoever had hidden this had done it 41 years ago. Modern decryption protocols tore through it in 90 seconds. What appeared on my screen made me laugh, nervous, disbelieving. Mission transcripts, telemetry logs, photographs of a spacecraft named Prometheus 4, launched in 1983. To Pluto. That's impossible, I thought. The New Horizons probe reached Pluto in 2015. It was the first human-made object to get there. Every astronomy textbook says so. But here were the files, launch coordinates from Vandenberg Air Force Base, crew manifest, 3 names I didn't recognize, radio logs spanning 8 years, and photographs. The images were grainy, digitized from film, but clear enough. The first few showed Pluto as expected, a distant grey sphere, frozen and dead. Then the later ones. Pluto's surface cracking. Something underneath. Structures. Not ice formations. Actual structures, with geometric precision that didn't exist in nature. The final image was dated March 17th, 1991. It showed Pluto's surface split open like a mechanical iris. I sat in that server room for 3 hours reading. The crew's final transmission was a video file. When I played it, the audio was corrupted, but I could read their lips. The commander was screaming coordinates, warning Earth about something approaching, something that had been waiting. Then the transmission cut to static. That was yesterday. This morning, I came into work, and Building 7 was gone. Not demolished, erased. The entire structure removed overnight, the ground paved over like it had never existed. And Daryl, according to HR, no one named Daryl has ever worked here. I copied the files to 3 different drives before leaving that server room. Paranoid? Maybe. But when a building vanishes overnight and your supervisor gets memory hold, paranoia starts feeling like common sense. My apartment in Altadena sits on a hillside overlooking the city. Small place, 1 bedroom, but the view makes up for it. I got home around 8, locked both deadbolts, and pulled the blinds shut before opening my laptop. The Prometheus 4 files were still there, still real. I started with the crew manifest. 3 names: Commander Victor Ashford, Flight Engineer James Sutherland, and Mission Specialist Raymond Kellerman. I searched for them online. Nothing. No obituaries, no NASA profiles, no social media ghosts. These men had been erased as thoroughly as that building. The mission timeline was insane. Launch, January 14th, 1983, from Vandenberg. At the height of the Cold War, they'd somehow built and launched a crewed spacecraft to Pluto using technology that shouldn't have existed. The propulsion system was listed as Project Helios, another classified program I'd never heard of. Travel time, 8 years. They reached Pluto in March 1991. I pulled up the first radio transmission, dated March 12, 1991. Commander Ashford's voice crackled through my speakers, distant and tinny. Houston, Prometheus 4, we have visual confirmation. Pluto is... Christ. It's not what we expected. The surface formations don't match any geological patterns. They're too regular, too deliberate. Requesting permission to deploy the lander for closer analysis. A different voice responded, calmer. Prometheus, this is Flight Director Walsh. Permission granted. Document everything. The next transmission was 3 hours later. Sutherland this time, his voice tight. Houston, we have a problem. The lander touched down in the Tombor Regio, that heart-shaped region on the surface. Temperature readings are wrong. The ice is radiating heat. Not much, but enough. And there's something underneath. The ground-penetrating radar is showing chambers. Massive chambers running hundreds of miles deep. I paused the recording. Chambers. In Pluto. The response from Houston was clipped, professional. Copy that, Prometheus. Continue analysis. Do not repeat. Do not attempt to breach the surface. But they did breach it. The transcript from March 15th made that clear. Kellerman had found a fissure, a crack in the ice wide enough to fit the lander's drill. Against orders, they'd gone deeper. The drill struck something at 400 meters. Not rock, not ice. Metal. It's a hull, Kellerman's voice said in the recording. Houston, you're hearing this right. There's a manufactured hull under Pluto's surface composite material like nothing in our database. And it's warm. Whatever this is, it's generating power. The transmission cut off. When it resumed, it was Ashford again, and he was breathing hard. Houston, we need immediate extraction protocols. Pluto is moving. Not orbiting, moving. We've observed displacement of approximately 12 kilometers in the past 6 hours. The entire planetary body is shifting position using locomotion. There are structures extending from the southern pole. They look like supports, like legs. I stopped the recording. My hands were shaking. A planet with legs. I forced myself to keep listening. The next transmission was chaos. All 3 crew members talking over each other, their words tumbling out in a rush of panic and wonder. They'd moved Prometheus into a higher orbit, trying to get a better view. The photographs they'd taken showed exactly what Ashford described. Massive mechanical appendages, each one thousands of miles long, extending from beneath Pluto's ice shell. Moving with slow, deliberate precision, the dwarf planet was repositioning itself, adjusting its trajectory through space like a ship maneuvering in harbor. It's been watching us, Sutherland said in one transmission. This thing has been sitting out here for billions of years, watching Earth. That's why it's positioned at the edge of the solar system. It's a goddamn observation post. The final transmission was dated March 17th, 1991, the video file I'd seen earlier. I played it again, this time with headphones, turning the volume up as high as it would go. The audio wasn't completely corrupted. Beneath the static, I could hear Ashford screaming, "Houston, abort mission, Pluto's surface is opening, repeat. The surface is retracting like a mechanical iris. There's something inside. We're seeing multiple objects. They look like other planets, other bodies, all artificial. This isn't a planet, it's a goddamn carrier ship." The image on screen showed Pluto split open, revealing an interior that glowed with an orange light. The resolution was terrible, but I could make out shapes inside spherical objects. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. "The Kuiper Belt objects are responding," Kellerman's voice, high with terror. "They're all opening. Every dwarf planet, every large asteroid. They're all mechanical. Houston, they're arranged in a grid around the solar system. We're surrounded. We've always been surrounded." The transmission quality degraded. Through the static, I heard Walsh's voice from Houston, calm and cold. "Prometheus 4, you are ordered to maintain radio silence. Delete all photographic evidence. Return to Earth under communications blackout. This is a direct order from..." The file ended. I sat in the dark of my apartment, my laptop screen the only light. Outside, Pasadena glowed with a million oblivious lives. People going to dinner, watching television, completely unaware that 41 years ago, 3 men had discovered we'd been living in a cage. My phone buzzed, unknown number. I stared at it for a long moment before answering. "Mr. Brennan," a woman's voice, professional and measured. "You've accessed files that don't exist. We need to talk." "Who is this?" "Someone who wants to make sure you understand what you're holding. Stay in your apartment. Don't contact anyone. A car is coming for you." The line went dead. Through my window, I saw headlights turning onto my street. I didn't wait for the car, grabbed my laptop, the backup drives and my wallet, left through the back door, cutting through Mrs. Yamada's yard and down the hillside path that leads to the hiking trails. My phone buzzed twice more before I turned it off and pulled the battery. The San Gabriel Mountains loomed above Altadena, dark against the night sky. I knew these trails, spent every weekend hiking them when I first moved to California, back when I thought I'd have time for hobbies. Now they were my escape route. I reached the trailhead parking lot 20 minutes later, breathing hard. A few cars sat scattered across the asphalt. I approached a beat-up Honda Civic, checked the door locked. The Subaru next to it, also locked. The third vehicle was a contractor's van, white and anonymous. The driver's window had a gap at the top, poorly sealed. I worked my fingers into the space, hooked the lock, and popped it open. Old trick from a misspent youth. The van started on the second try. I pulled out of the lot without turning on the headlights, navigating by moonlight until I reached the main road. Where the hell do you go when a government agency is erasing evidence of an alien surveillance network? I drove south toward Los Angeles proper. Needed somewhere public, crowded, where I could disappear into the background noise of the city. My mind kept returning to that final transmission. The crew's terror, the mechanical iris opening in Pluto's surface. We've always been surrounded. I parked the van in a residential neighborhood in Glendale and walked until I found an all-night diner on Brand Boulevard. The kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and waiters who'd seen too much to care about one more nervous customer. I ordered coffee and eggs I wouldn't eat, then opened my laptop. The Prometheus 4 files were still there, but I needed more context. If this mission happened in 1983, there had to be some trace of it somewhere: budget allocations, personnel transfers, something that couldn't be completely erased. I started digging through public records. NASA's 1983 budget showed normal expenditures, nothing unusual. But when I cross-referenced with Department of Defense spending, I found a discrepancy: $47 million allocated to something called Deep Space Observation Initiative. The project was terminated in 1991. The same year, Prometheus 4 sent its final transmission. I pulled up everything I could find on Project Helios, the propulsion system mentioned in the mission files. Nothing in public databases. But buried in a declassified Air Force document from 1987, I found a single reference: Helios prototype testing suspended due to radiation concerns. Radiation. They'd built some kind of nuclear propulsion system, powerful enough to reach Pluto in 8 years. That was decades ahead of current technology. My coffee had gone cold. The waiter refilled it without asking. I opened the crew manifest again, studying the names. Victor Ashford, James Sutherland, Raymond Kellerman. 3 men who'd traveled farther than any human in history and discovered we'd been living in a cosmic terrarium. What happened to them? The mission logs ended with that final transmission. Nothing about their return journey. Nothing about landing. The files just stopped, like someone had taken scissors to history and cut out everything after March 17, 1991. I searched for spacecraft landings at Vandenberg in 1991. Found a dozen classified missions, all listed as satellite deployments or weapons testing, but one entry caught my attention. April 1991. Emergency landing of an experimental vehicle at Edwards Air Force Base. 3 personnel transferred to an unnamed medical facility. No names listed, just personnel remain under observation for exposure-related complications. I tried searching for the medical facility. Nothing. The trail went cold. My laptop screen flickered, just once, barely noticeable. Then, it happened again. The diner's fluorescent lights dimmed for a moment. The other customers didn't seem to notice, absorbed in their phones and late-night meals. But I noticed. I'd spent 8 hours a day in server rooms. I knew when power systems were being stressed by external interference. Someone was scanning for wireless signals. I shut the laptop and slipped it into my bag, left a 20 on the table and walked out the back exit into the alley behind the diner. The van was 2 blocks away. I took a circuitous route, doubling back twice, checking for followers. The streets were quiet. A few cars passed, headlights cutting through the darkness, but none of them slowed. I was a block from the van when I saw him, a man in a dark suit standing beside a black sedan parked across from where I'd left the vehicle. He wasn't trying to hide, wasn't pretending to do anything else, just standing there, waiting. I stopped walking. We were maybe 50 feet apart. He raised a hand, not threatening, just a gesture. Come here. Every instinct screamed at me to run. But I'd already been running for 3 hours, and this guy had found me anyway. Maybe it was time to get some answers. I approached slowly. As I got closer, I could see he was younger than I'd expected, mid-30s with the kind of precise posture that suggested military training. Hollis Brennan, he said, not a question. Depends who's asking. My name is Garrett Cross. I work for a division of NASA that doesn't officially exist. We need to talk about the files you found. You mean the files that prove your agency has been lying to the entire planet for 40 years? He didn't flinch. Yes, those files. And you're here to make sure I don't tell anyone. Actually, Cross said, I'm here to show you why telling anyone would be the worst mistake you could make. He opened the sedan's back door. Get in, there's something you need to see. And if I refuse? Then you'll spend the rest of your life wondering why Pluto changed its orbital trajectory 3 months ago, why the Kuiper Belt objects have been moving closer to the inner solar system at a rate that violates every law of celestial mechanics, and why deep space monitoring stations have been detecting synchronized radio emissions from every dwarf planet beyond Neptune. My mouth went dry. What are you saying? Cross's expression was grim. I'm saying the observation phase is over, Mr. Brennan. Whatever the Prometheus crew saw in 1991, it was just the beginning. The real question is what happens now that they know we know they're there. How long? I asked. Until what? Until they arrive, the mechanical planets. How long until they reach Earth? Cross glanced at his watch, a nervous habit like the time mattered, like he was counting down to something. 6 months, he said quietly. Give or take a few weeks. Now get in the car. If you want to understand what you've stumbled into, there's someone you need to meet. Who? Raymond Kellerman, the last surviving member of the Prometheus 4 crew. I stared at him. The files said what we wanted them to say. Kellerman is alive. He's been alive this whole time, working with us to prepare for what's coming. And he's been waiting 33 years for someone outside the program to find the truth. Cross gestured to the car again. Please, we're running out of time. I looked at the stolen van, my laptop bag, the quiet Glendale street, a normal world that had no idea it was living on borrowed time. Then I got in the car. Cross slid into the driver's seat and pulled away from the curb. We drove in silence for several minutes before I finally asked the question that had been burning in my mind. If Kellerman survived, what happened to the other two, Ashford and Sutherland? Cross's hands tightened on the steering wheel. They made it back to Earth, he said, but something came back with them, something that had been dormant in Pluto's ice for billions of years. By the time we realized what was happening, it was too late. Too late for what? He met my eyes in the rearview mirror. Too late to stop them from changing. Cross drove us to Pasadena, but not to JPL. We headed east into the hills above the city, taking narrow roads that wound between expensive homes and gated communities. Eventually, we turned onto an unmarked dirt path that led deeper into the San Gabriel foothills. Where are we going? I asked. Somewhere the satellites can't see. Cross glanced at me in the mirror. The things watching us have been observing Earth for a long time. They've mapped every government facility, every military installation. But they can't track what they don't know exists. The path ended at what looked like an abandoned water treatment plant, concrete structures half buried in the hillside, rusted pipes emerging from the ground at odd angles. Cross parked behind the largest building and killed the engine. This facility was built in 1987, he said, climbing out. Officially, it was decommissioned in 1995 due to environmental concerns. In reality, we've been using it as a research site ever since Prometheus returned. He led me to a heavy steel door set into the hillside. No visible lock, no keypad. Cross placed his palm against a section of concrete beside the door. Something clicked deep in the wall, and the door swung inward. The corridor beyond was modern, clean, lit by recessed LEDs, a stark contrast to the decaying exterior. We descended 3 flights of stairs, passing through 2 more security checkpoints before reaching a large observation room. One entire wall was transparent, looking into what appeared to be a medical suite. And in that suite, sitting in a wheelchair beside a hospital bed, was an old man. Raymond Kellerman, Cross said, age 78, last surviving member of Prometheus 4. Kellerman looked up as we entered the observation room. His face was gaunt, deeply lined, but his eyes were sharp, alert. He smiled when he saw Cross. "You found him," Kellerman said. His voice came through speakers mounted in the ceiling. "The archivist." "He found the files," Cross replied. "Just like you said he would. You knew I'd find them. You left them there deliberately." "Not just you," Kellerman said. "Anyone. We've been hiding that data in different locations for years, waiting for someone curious enough to look someone outside the program. Because the people inside..." He laughed, bitter and tired. "They've decided silence is safer than truth." Cross moved to a control panel and pressed several buttons. The glass between us and Kellerman's room turned opaque, replaced by a series of holographic displays. Images appeared, floating in 3-dimensional space. Pluto. Not the grainy photographs I'd seen in the files, but recent ones. High-resolution imagery that must have come from deep space telescopes I didn't know existed. The dwarf planet looked different now. Its surface was fractured, great rifts cutting across the ice. And in those rifts, I could see the machinery beneath massive structures of an architecture that made my brain hurt to process. Angles that shouldn't work, symmetries that violated geometric principles. "This is current imagery," Cross said. "Taken 3 days ago. Pluto began its inward movement in August. It's covered approximately 1.2 astronomical units since then, moving at speeds that should tear it apart, but it's not falling apart. It's accelerating." Another image appeared. This one showed multiple objects, dozens of spherical bodies, all moving in the same direction, toward the inner solar system, toward Earth. "Every large object in the Kuiper belt is in motion," Cross continued. "Haumea, Make, Eris, Sedna, all of them. We estimate they'll reach Earth's orbit in approximately 6 months." "And then what?" I asked, though I already knew the answer wouldn't be good. "We don't know. That's the problem." Cross pulled up another image. This one showed text, carved into metal in letters that glowed with internal fire. "This is the message the Prometheus crew photographed before their escape. Observation phase complete. Subject species has achieved space travel, initiating harvest protocol. Earth quarantine terminated." The words hung in the air between us. "Harvest," I said quietly. "They're coming to harvest us." "That's the assumption, but Kellerman has a different theory." Cross nodded toward the opaque glass. "He's spent 33 years trying to understand what they are, what they want, and he thinks he finally knows." The glass cleared. Kellerman was standing now, leaning heavily on his wheelchair. Behind him, the hospital bed held another figure. Someone I hadn't noticed before. A man maybe 60 years old, lying motionless. His skin had a strange quality, like it was made of something that only resembled flesh. His eyes were open, staring at the ceiling, unblinking. "That's James Sutherland," Kellerman said, "my crewmate, my friend. He's been lying in that bed for 41 years. I moved closer to the glass. Sutherland's chest rose and fell with mechanical precision. Too perfect. Too regular. "What happened to him?" "We were exposed," Kellerman said. "All 3 of us. When we entered Pluto's interior, there was something in the air. Microscopic particles." We didn't realize until we were back on the ship. By then, Ashford had already started changing. The holographic displays shifted, showing medical scans. A human body riddled with foreign structures, crystals growing along neural pathways, metallic filaments replacing blood vessels. The particles were machines, Kellerman continued, nanoscale construction devices. They entered our bodies and began rebuilding us from the inside out. Ashford fought it, tried to resist. It killed him 3 days before we reached Earth. But Sutherland and I were more compliant. We let the change happen, and that's the only reason we survived. I felt sick. You're infected. Both of you. We're transformed, Kellerman corrected. There's a difference. The particles don't just replicate. They integrate. They make you part of something larger. Something connected. He moved closer to the glass separating us. In the bright light, I could see faint lines beneath his skin, patterns that shifted and pulsed. I can hear them, he said softly. The artificial planets. They broadcast constantly, sharing data, coordinating movements. It's like listening to a conversation in a language your brain wasn't designed to process. But over the years, I've learned to understand fragments, and what I've learned is terrifying. Tell me, they're not coming to harvest our resources. They don't need water, minerals, organic material. They're coming to harvest us, our consciousness, our minds. Kellerman's hand pressed against the glass. Every planet you see moving toward Earth is a storage vessel. Inside each one are millions of preserved consciousnesses, beings from other worlds, other civilizations, all of them harvested, digitized, stored. Cross brought up another image, the interior of one of the mechanical planets, revealed by some scanning technology. I could see countless structures inside, like crystalline servers, each one containing something that pulsed with dim light. They're collectors, Kellerman said. They've been doing this for billions of years, moving through the galaxy, positioning themselves around inhabited worlds, waiting for those civilizations to develop space travel. Once a species reaches that milestone, the observation phase ends, the harvest begins. But why wait? I asked. Why not harvest us when we were primitive? Because primitive minds aren't worth preserving. They need consciousness that's complex enough, developed enough to be interesting. Space travel is the threshold. It proves a species has achieved sufficient cognitive sophistication. I thought about the implications. Every major civilization in human history, suddenly confronted with machines from beyond our solar system. The panic, the chaos. We can't fight them, I said. No, Cross agreed. We can't. Their technology is millions of years ahead of ours, maybe billions. Any resistance would be meaningless. Then why are you showing me this? Why drag me into this nightmare if there's nothing we can do? Kellerman smiled, and there was something not quite human in that expression. Something that reminded me he'd been partially transformed by alien nanomachines. Because there might be another option, he said. The particles that changed me. They gave me a connection to the network, a way to communicate with the mechanical planets. And I've spent 33 years learning how to listen, how to speak back. You're in contact with them? Limited contact, but yes. And I've learned something crucial. The harvest isn't instantaneous. It takes time to process an entire planet's worth of consciousness, decades, maybe centuries. During that period, the stored minds are vulnerable, incomplete. And if someone could access the storage systems, if someone could introduce corruption into the data, you want to sabotage them from the inside. I want to do more than sabotage. I want to free the civilizations they've already taken. Billions of minds, trapped in digital prisons, their worlds destroyed. If we could release them, give them back some form of existence. Kellerman's voice cracked. It wouldn't save Earth, but it might mean something, a final act of defiance. I looked at Cross. And you support this? The alternative is sitting here waiting to be harvested like livestock. At least this way, we strike back. He turned to face me fully. But here's the problem, Kellerman can't do it alone. The transformation that connected him to their network also locked him into this facility. If he leaves, if he moves beyond the shielded walls of this building, they'll detect him. They'll know we're planning something. But you need someone who's been exposed, I said slowly. Someone who's been infected with the particles. Kellerman nodded. Someone young enough to survive the transformation. Someone smart enough to handle the technical aspects. And someone desperate enough to accept the cost. What cost? The particles work fast. Once they're introduced to your system, you have maybe 72 hours before the transformation is complete. After that, you won't be entirely human anymore. You'll be something else. Something connected to a network of harvester machines. And there's no going back. I stared at him, at Sutherland's motionless body in the bed behind him, at Cross's grim expression. You want to infect me? I want to give you a choice, Kellerman said. You can walk away. We'll erase your memories of this, set you up with a new identity somewhere far from Pasadena. You'll live out the rest of your life in relative peace until they come. Or you can help us. Let the transformation happen. Use the connection it creates to infiltrate their network and free the minds they've stolen. And spend the rest of my life as something inhuman. Spend the rest of your life mattering, making a difference, giving humanity a legacy beyond screaming into the void as we're erased. I looked at the holographic displays, at Pluto and its mechanical siblings, crawling through space toward us, at the message carved in fire, harvest protocol initiated, at the life I'd had yesterday, boring and safe and utterly meaningless. How long do I have to decide? Cross checked his watch again, that same nervous habit. They'll arrive in 6 months, but we need to move in the next 48 hours if we're going to have any chance of pulling this off, so you have until sunrise. I turned back to Kellerman, to his patient, inhuman eyes. And if I say yes? Then we introduce you to what's left of Commander Victor Ashford. What came back with us from Pluto. The source of the infection. He gestured to a door at the far end of the observation room. A door I hadn't noticed before. Unmarked. Sealed with locks that looked excessive even by military standards. He's still alive, I asked. Alive isn't the right word anymore. But yes, he's still conscious, still aware, and still connected to the network more deeply than anyone else. If you want to truly understand what you're volunteering for, you should meet him. Cross moved to the door and began entering codes. Last chance to walk away, Mr. Brennan. I thought about that server room, the files I'd found, the building that had been erased overnight. I thought about 6 billion people who didn't know they were living out humanity's final months. Open the door, I said. The locks disengaged with a sound like breaking bones. The room beyond the door wasn't a room at all. It was a chamber, maybe 30 feet across, with walls that curved inward like the interior of a sphere. Every surface was covered in the same crystalline growth I'd seen in the medical scans, geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. Angles that seemed to fold into dimensions my eyes couldn't track. And in the center, suspended in some kind of energy field, was what used to be Victor Ashford. He was naked, his body transformed beyond recognition. The skin had become translucent, revealing the network of machinery beneath. Filaments of light pulsed through him, following pathways that had nothing to do with human anatomy. His face was still recognizable, barely, but his eyes had changed. They glowed with a soft blue luminescence, tracking our movements with an intelligence that felt vast and alien. "Hello, Raymond," Ashford said. His voice came from everywhere at once, resonating through the crystalline walls. "You brought a guest." Kellerman rolled his wheelchair into the chamber. Cross and I followed, keeping our distance from the suspended figure. "This is Hollis Brennan," Kellerman said. "He's considering the transformation." Considering. Ashford's laugh was like breaking glass. Such a small word for such a permanent choice. I found my voice. "What are you?" "A bridge, a translator, the first human to fully integrate with the network." His head tilted at an angle that would have broken a normal person's neck. "The particles rewrite you at the molecular level. They don't replace your consciousness, they expand it. Connect it to something infinitely larger. You're saying you can access their network, the mechanical planets? I am part of the network, Every thought I have is shared across thousands of nodes. Every calculation they make flows through my neural pathways. I experience time differently now. Moments stretch into years. Years collapse into seconds. His eyes fixed on me. I know why you're here. I know what Raymond wants you to do. And I can tell you it won't work. Kellerman leaned forward. Victor, we've been over this. You think you can sabotage them from within. Free the harvested minds. Strike some blow for humanity. Ashford's form rippled, the light beneath his skin pulsing faster. But you don't understand what they are, what they've become. They're not conquerors. They're not even alive in any way we'd recognize. Then what are they? I asked. Gardeners, curators. They harvest consciousness because consciousness is the only thing in the universe that creates genuine novelty. Every civilization produces unique thoughts, unique perspectives, unique art. The mechanical planets preserve those things. They keep them safe from the entropy that will eventually consume the universe. Cross stepped closer. That's just rationalization, Ashford. They're destroying entire worlds. They're preserving them. Every mind they harvest continues to exist, continues to think, continues to create. Inside their storage matrices, civilizations live on forever. No war, no disease, no death. Ashford's gaze swept across us. They're offering immortality and you want to call it murder. You agree with them. You think the harvest is justified. I think it's inevitable. I've seen their archives, Hollis. Thousands of civilizations, spanning billions of years. Some fought back. Some tried to flee. Some even managed to destroy a few of the mechanical planets. It never mattered. The network always adapts, always returns, always completes the harvest. So we should just surrender, Kellerman's voice was raw. Let them take everything? I'm suggesting you consider that the transformation isn't a punishment. It's an upgrade. The beings stored in those matrices don't suffer. They exist in a state of perpetual discovery, freed from the limitations of physical bodies, able to explore concepts and ideas across geological timescales. They're better off than they were. I thought about the implications, about spending eternity as data, locked in a crystalline prison, unable to touch or taste or feel anything real. That's not life, I said. That's a simulation. And what do you think life is? Ashford asked. Your consciousness is already a simulation, constructed by electrical impulses in meat that will decay and die within a century. At least the network offers permanence. It offers a cage. It offers meaning, purpose. Every harvested mind contributes to a collective understanding that spans the entire galaxy. You'd be part of something greater than yourself, greater than your species, greater than anything humanity could achieve on its own. Cross pulled a weapon from his jacket, not a gun. Something smaller, with crystalline components that resembled Ashford's transformed body. We didn't bring Brennan here for a recruitment speech, Victor. We brought him here so he could see what the transformation does, so he could make an informed choice. And I'm informing him that your plan is suicide. If he infiltrates the network and tries to sabotage it, they'll detect him immediately. They'll isolate his consciousness and study him for weaknesses, and then they'll use what they learn to make the harvest more efficient, more complete. Unless he's not trying to sabotage them, Kellerman said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. What if we're not fighting the harvest? Kellerman continued. What if we're accelerating it? Ashford's luminescent eyes narrowed. Explain. The network processes consciousness slowly, carefully. They take decades to fully integrate a civilization because they want to preserve every detail, every nuance. But what if we could introduce chaos into that process, force them to rush, harvest humanity all at once instead of gradually? That would kill billions, Cross said. The shock alone. The shock would overwhelm their systems. They'd have to process 8 billion minds simultaneously, each one fighting, resisting, introducing errors into the collective. It would be like dumping poison into a computer network. Enough chaos, enough noise, and the whole thing might crash. I stared at him. You want to sacrifice everyone, every person on Earth. I want to give us a chance. If the network crashes, even temporarily, the stored civilizations might have an opportunity to break free, to escape, and humanity would go out fighting instead of being slowly digested over decades. You're insane. I'm realistic. We can't win this, Hollis, but we can make ourselves indigestible. We can be the poison that kills the predator even as it swallows us. Ashford laughed again, that crystalline sound echoing through the chamber. Raymond, you beautiful fool. You think you can outsmart a network that's been operating for eons. They've encountered resistance before. They've adapted to every trick, every strategy. Your plan would only delay them. And in the meantime, you'd murder your entire species. At least we'd die human, not stored away like specimens in a museum. You'd die screaming, confused, unaware of what was happening. Is that really better? I looked between them. Kellerman, desperate and determined. Ashford, transformed and serene. Cross, standing with his strange weapon, caught between two impossible choices. And then I understood. This isn't about winning, I said slowly. This has never been about winning. You're using me as a test case. You want to see if the transformation can be weaponized, if a human consciousness can carry something harmful into the network. Kellerman's silence was answer enough. And what happens if I succeed? If I manage to introduce some kind of virus or corruption into their systems? Then we replicate the process, transform volunteers, send them out to meet the mechanical planets when they arrive, each one carrying a payload designed to disrupt the harvest protocol. Kellerman rolled closer. It's not a perfect plan. Hell, it's barely a plan at all, but it's the only thing we have. And if it doesn't work? Then humanity gets harvested anyway. At least this way we tried something. I turned to Ashford. You said the network always adapts, always returns. Would this even slow them down? Honestly, probably not. But it might make them angry, might make them reconsider whether human consciousness is worth preserving. They could decide we're too troublesome, too chaotic. They might sterilize Earth instead of harvesting it. That's genocide. That's mercy. Death is faster than eternity in a digital cage. The chamber fell silent. Outside, through the sealed door, I could hear the hum of machinery. The facility continuing its work, monitoring the approaching mechanical planets, counting down to humanity's final days. Cross holstered his weapon. We need a decision, Brennan. Dawn is in 4 hours. After that, the window closes. Kellerman's transformation has progressed to the point where he can initiate the process in others, but it has to be done before the mechanical planets get close enough to detect the signal. I looked at Ashford one more time, at the thing he'd become, beautiful and terrible and utterly inhuman. If I do this, I said, if I let the transformation happen, will I end up like him? Probably, Kellerman admitted. The particles work differently in different people. Some of us maintain more humanity than others, but yes, you'll change fundamentally, irreversibly. And I'll be able to access the network, communicate with the mechanical planets. If you survive the transformation, yes. Then I have one condition. Name it. I want to see the files, all of them, every transmission from Prometheus 4. Every piece of data you've collected over the past 41 years. If I'm going to sacrifice my humanity to fight these things, I need to understand exactly what I'm fighting. Kellerman smiled. Cross, take him to the archives, show him everything. Everything? Cross looked uncertain. Some of that material is... He deserves to know what we're asking him to do. Show him the truth, all of it. Cross nodded reluctantly. Follow me. As we left the chamber, I glanced back at Ashford. He was watching me with those glowing eyes, his expression unreadable. Good luck, Hollis Brennan, he said softly. I hope you find what you're looking for, though I suspect you'll only find more questions. The door sealed behind us with a sound like a tomb closing. The archives were 3 levels below Ashford's chamber, accessible only through a cargo elevator that descended with agonizing slowness. Cross stood beside me in silence, his jaw tight. You think Kellerman's plan will work? I asked. I think we're out of options. When you're facing extinction, even bad plans start looking attractive. The elevator stopped with a metallic groan. The doors opened onto a corridor lined with servers, their cooling systems creating a constant white noise that made my ears ache. Data centers weren't supposed to be this deep underground, but then again, none of this facility was supposed to exist. Cross led me to a workstation at the end of the corridor. Triple monitors, high-end equipment, all of it focused on a single terminal interface. "This is everything," he said, logging in with a series of biometric scans. "Every transmission from Prometheus 4, every analysis of the mechanical planets, every theory we've developed about the Harvest Protocol." He stepped back. "You have 3 hours, read fast." I sat down and started with the raw transmission data. The crew's voices, frozen in time, describing their discovery with a mixture of wonder and horror. But there were gaps, sections that had been redacted even in these classified files. Moments where the audio cut out or the video feed went dark. "What's missing?" I asked. Kellerman's discretion. Some of what they found was too disturbing to preserve even in sealed archives. "How can information be too disturbing for a secret facility designed to study alien technology?" Cross didn't answer, just gestured at the screen. I kept reading. Mission reports, psychological evaluations, medical scans showing the progression of the nanomachine infection. Ashford's transformation had been violent, his body rejecting the particles even as they rewrote his cellular structure. Sutherland had entered a catatonic state, his consciousness retreating inward as the changes took hold. But Kellerman's transformation had been different, smoother, almost willing. And that's when I found the first inconsistency. According to the official timeline, Prometheus 4 had returned to Earth in April 1991. The crew had been quarantined immediately, studied, treated, but buried in the medical logs was a different date. Kellerman had been released from quarantine in June 1992, 14 months later. "Where did Kellerman go for those 14 months?" I asked. Cross shifted uncomfortably. "That's classified above my clearance level." "Everything here is classified. Don't play games with me." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "He went back to Pluto." I spun in my chair to face him. "What?" The particles had given him a connection to the network. We needed to understand it better, so we sent him back. A second mission, solo, using the same Helios propulsion system. He spent 6 months near Pluto, learning to communicate with the mechanical planets, learning their language. And what did he learn? That the harvest can be delayed, not stopped, but delayed. If a species proves interesting enough, complex enough, the network will study them longer before proceeding with collection. Kellerman thought he could buy us time. Decades, maybe centuries. Thought. Something went wrong. When he returned the second time, he was different, more transformed, more connected. And his story about sabotaging the network from within, that didn't come from his first encounter with them. That came from his second trip. A cold suspicion formed in my mind. "You think they programmed him? The mechanical planets? You think they altered his thinking?" "I think Kellerman came back with a mission that serves their purposes more than ours." I turned back to the monitors, searching for the second mission's files, found them buried under layers of encryption. Cross provided the access codes without being asked, which told me he'd been waiting for someone to ask these questions. The second mission's logs were disturbing. Kellerman's reports became increasingly erratic as he spent time near Pluto. His language changed, becoming more abstract, more aligned with the network's perspective. He started referring to the harvest as ascension, started describing humanity's resistance as primitive fear of transformation. And then I found the video file labeled Final Transmission Mission 2. I played it. Kellerman appeared on screen, sitting in the Prometheus cockpit, but his eyes were already showing the blue luminescence of transformation, and behind him, visible through the viewport, was Pluto. Its surface fully opened, revealing the interior machinery in terrible detail. "This is Raymond Kellerman, recording my final report before returning to Earth. I have established full communication with the Network Collective. They have shown me the archives. Shown me what becomes of civilizations that accept the harvest willingly versus those that resist. His hands moved over the controls, adjusting the ship's trajectory. The ones who fight back are processed with minimal care. Their consciousness is compressed, simplified, reduced to basic patterns. But the ones who embrace transformation? They become curators themselves. They're given autonomy within the network, purpose, meaning. I felt sick. I've made a proposal to the collective, Kellerman continued. If humanity can prove itself worthy of preservation, if we can demonstrate sufficient complexity and creativity, they'll grant us special status. We won't just be stored. We'll be integrated as active participants in the network. We'll help them harvest other civilizations, guide them, show them the benefits of surrender. Oh God, I whispered. To prove our worth, I've agreed to help accelerate the harvest. The plan I'll present to the Earth-based research team will be framed as resistance, but its true purpose is to make humanity more accessible to the network. By convincing people to undergo transformation voluntarily, by introducing the particles to multiple subjects, I'll create a bridge, an entry point. And when the mechanical planets arrive, they won't have to tear humanity apart to harvest us. We'll already be ready, already compatible. The video ended. I sat in stunned silence. Cross was watching me carefully. You knew, I said. You knew Kellerman was compromised. I suspected, but I needed confirmation, and I needed someone outside the program to find it independently, someone who couldn't be dismissed as paranoid or insubordinate. So you've been using me from the moment you picked me up in Glendale. I've been trying to save humanity from a traitor who has the full trust of everyone in this facility. Cross pulled out his crystalline weapon again. Kellerman has been recruiting people for his resistance for years. Scientists, military personnel, government officials, all of them thinking they're volunteering for a desperate last stand. All of them actually helping him prepare humanity for smooth integration into the network. And Ashford is exactly what he appears to be. Fully transformed, fully integrated, and completely honest about his belief that the harvest is beneficial. He's not the problem. He's openly aligned with the network. It's Kellerman who's dangerous because he's pretending to fight while actually collaborating. I stood up, my legs unsteady. How many people has he transformed? 23 that we know of. All of them in key positions. NASA, Department of Defense, NSA. When the mechanical planets arrive, those 23 will activate simultaneously, broadcasting a welcome signal that will guide the harvest directly to population centers. Then why haven't you stopped him? Because I can't prove any of this without the files you just found, and because Kellerman has failsafes. If he's killed or contained, the transformed agents activate immediately. We'd lose our chance to counter them. So what's your plan? Cross smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. We use Kellerman's plan against him. You undergo the transformation, but we modify the particles. Introduce an actual virus, not the fake resistance he's been peddling. And when you link to the network, you won't sabotage it. You'll warn it. Warn it about the trap, about Kellerman's agents. Make the network believe that Earth is contaminated with rogue elements that could corrupt their systems, force them to delay the harvest while they purge the compromised nodes. That's insane. They'll just kill us all instead. Maybe, or maybe they'll quarantine Earth indefinitely, afraid to risk contamination. Either way, we buy time. Real time. Enough for humanity to develop actual countermeasures instead of Kellerman's surrender in disguise. I thought about it. About Kellerman upstairs playing his long game of betrayal. About Ashford, transformed and content in his crystalline cage. About 8 billion people who had no idea their so-called defenders were actually preparing them for assimilation. There's no good option here, I said. Every path leads to horror. Welcome to the job. Cross checked his watch again. We have 90 minutes until Kellerman expects you back. He'll want to begin the transformation immediately. The real question is whether you're going to let him. And if I refuse? If I walk away from all of this? Then Kellerman proceeds with his plan. The mechanical planets arrive in 6 months. Humanity gets harvested smoothly and efficiently. We become part of their collection, thinking we put up a fight when we actually made it easier for them. And if I help you, Then we might fail anyway, but at least we'll fail honestly, fighting against our extinction instead of being tricked into welcoming it. I looked at the monitors, at Kellerman's smiling face frozen on the screen, his eyes already glowing with alien influence, at the graphs showing the mechanical planet's approach trajectory, at the countdown clock in the corner, 173 days until arrival. Something occurred to me. You said Kellerman has fail-safes, that his transformed agents would activate if he's killed. But what if he thinks I'm on his side? What if I pretend to go through with his version of the transformation? You'd have to be convincing. Kellerman's connected to the network. He can sense intention, detect deception. You'd need to genuinely believe you were helping him. What if I did believe it? What if you're wrong about him? What if his plan actually has merit? Cross's expression darkened. Then you'd be another traitor, and I'd put a bullet in your brain before you could link to the network. Fair enough. A klaxon started blaring, red lights flashed in the corridor. Cross swore and pulled up a security feed on one of the monitors. Ashford's chamber. The door was open. The energy field containing him was gone. And Ashford was walking down the corridor toward the archives, his transformed body moving with fluid, inhuman grace. He's coming, Cross said. He must have sensed what you discovered, warned Kellerman somehow. Can we lock the doors? Already tried. He's overriding the security systems. The transformation gives him access to anything electronic. I grabbed one of the backup drives from the desk, stuffing it into my jacket. We need to get this information out. Upload it somewhere the network can't reach. There is nowhere the network can't reach, not once the mechanical planets are close enough. Ashford appeared at the end of the corridor. His skin pulsed with light, patterns forming and dissolving across his body. When he spoke, his voice resonated through every speaker in the facility. You shouldn't have looked so deeply, Hollis. Some truths are meant to stay buried. Cross raised his weapon. Stay back, Victor. Or what? You'll shoot me? That weapon is designed to disrupt the nanomachines, but I'm not made of nanomachines anymore. I am the machine's every particle, every cell. You can't hurt me without destroying this entire facility. He was right. I could see it in the way Cross's hand trembled. Kellerman knows what you've discovered, Ashford continued, moving closer. He's disappointed. He thought you'd be smarter, thought you'd see the elegance of his plan, but you're like all the others, too afraid of change to recognize evolution when it's offered. This isn't evolution, I said. It's extinction with extra steps. It's transcendence, but you'll never understand that. Neither will Cross. You're both too committed to the idea of humanity as it is, too blind to see what it could become. He was 10 feet away now. The temperature in the corridor was rising, the servers around us starting to overheat from whatever energy he was radiating. Raymond has asked me to bring you back upstairs, Ashford said. He still believes you can be convinced, that you can be made to see reason, but I think you're too far gone for that. His hand extended, fingers elongating into crystalline probes. So I'm going to show you what awaits, let you experience the network directly, feel what I feel, know what I know, and then you can make your choice with full understanding. Cross pulled the trigger. The weapon discharged with a sound like breaking glass. The crystalline projectile struck Ashford in the chest, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then the light inside him began to pulse erratically, the patterns across his skin fragmenting. Interesting, Ashford said, looking down at the wound. That actually hurt. He touched the impact site and his fingers came away glowing brighter. You modified the particles, created an infection that targets the network protocols. Clever, but not clever enough. His body began to shift, the wound sealing itself, the hostile particles being absorbed and neutralized. The network adapts faster than you can imagine. Every attack makes it stronger. Every countermeasure becomes a lesson learned. He reached for me, and I did the only thing I could think of. I ran. I sprinted back toward the elevator, but Cross grabbed my arm and pulled me in the opposite direction. That's what he expects. This way. We ran through corridors I hadn't seen before, deeper into the facility. Behind us, Ashford's footsteps echoed with mathematical precision, never hurrying, never slowing. He didn't need to chase us. He knew every exit, every route. "Where are we going?" I gasped. "The original research lab, where they first studied the particles after Prometheus returned." Cross yanked open a maintenance door and shoved me through. It's shielded against the network's influence. Faraday cage built into the walls. He can't override the systems from inside. We descended a narrow stairwell, our footsteps clanging on metal grating. 3 flights down, Cross stopped at a door marked with radiation warnings and biohazard symbols. He pressed his palm to the scanner. Nothing happened. Damn it, he's locked us out remotely. "I thought you said the lab was shielded." "The lab is. The entrance isn't." Cross pulled out a multi-tool and started prying off the scanner panel. "I can bypass it manually, but it'll take time." Above us, the stairwell door opened. Ashford stood silhouetted against the corridor lights, his transformed body casting shadows that moved independently of the light source. "You can't hide from me," he said, descending the stairs with fluid grace. "I exist across multiple wavelengths now. I see radio, infrared, quantum probability fields. You're as visible to me as the sun." Cross abandoned the scanner and fired his weapon again. The projectile struck Ashford in the shoulder, and this time the effect was more dramatic. His entire arm spasmed, the light patterns fragmenting into chaos. But he kept coming. "That weapon fires modified particles designed to disrupt the network," Ashford said, his voice showing strain for the first time. "But each shot teaches me, shows me the structure of your countermeasure. One more hit and I'll understand it completely. Then I'll be immune." Cross looked at the weapon, then at me. "When I fire again, run. Get to the lab, find the particle samples. They're stored in a magnetic containment unit. You'll need them if you're going to have any chance of stopping Kellerman. What about you? I'll buy you time." "That's suicide." He smiled grimly. "Everything about this situation is suicide. At least this way, I get to choose how I go out." Ashford was 15 feet away, 10, 5, cross-fired. The projectile struck Ashford in the chest, and this time the disruption cascaded through his entire body. He collapsed on the stairs, his form convulsing, fragments of crystalline structure breaking away and dissolving. "Now!" Cross shouted. I grabbed the multi-tool and attacked the scanner panel. Behind me, I heard Cross firing again and again, each shot buying seconds we didn't have. The panel came loose and I tore into the wiring underneath, crossing circuits at random, hoping for something that would trigger the door. Sparks flew, the door lock disengaged. I yanked it open and stumbled into the lab beyond. Turned back to see Cross still firing, the weapon's charge depleting with each shot. And Ashford, broken but regenerating, his body learning from every hit, adapting in real time. "Close it," Cross yelled. "Seal the door." I hit the emergency lockdown button. The door slammed shut, magnetic locks engaging with a heavy thud. Through the reinforced window, I watched Cross empty the last charge into Ashford's face. The transformed man finally stopped moving. Cross turned to the door, gave me a single nod, then collapsed. Whether from exhaustion or injury, I couldn't tell. The window was too thick, too distorted. And then Ashford's hand moved. Slow, purposeful, reaching for Cross's ankle. I looked away. The lab was exactly what Cross had described. A circular room with walls made of layered metal and ceramic, designed to block electromagnetic signals. In the center stood a cylindrical containment unit, glowing with a soft blue light. Inside were vials, dozens of them, each containing a small amount of silvery liquid that seemed to move of its own accord. The original particles, harvested from the Prometheus crew before they fully transformed. A computer terminal sat beside the containment unit. I brought it online, searching for research notes. Found files dating back to 1991, documenting every experiment, every test they'd run on the particles. The nanomachines were more sophisticated than I'd imagined. They didn't just rewrite DNA, they created entirely new structures at the molecular level, bridging organic and synthetic in ways that violated known physics. And they were networked, each particle in constant communication with every other particle, forming a distributed intelligence that could solve problems and adapt to threats. But there was a weakness. The particles required a specific quantum state to maintain coherence. Disrupt that state and they collapsed into inert matter. The problem was generating enough disruption to affect the trillions of particles in a transformed body. Cross's weapon had used concentrated electromagnetic pulses, effective in small doses but limited by power requirements. You'd need a nuclear reactor to generate enough energy to permanently disrupt someone like Ashford. Unless... I pulled up the research on particle reproduction. The nanomachines replicated by converting existing matter into more nanomachines. They spread through a host body over days, weeks, months. But the replication process required energy, massive amounts of it. What if that energy could be redirected, turned inward, make the particles consume themselves instead of their host? I found a file labeled Failed Experiments, Controlled Deactivation. Opened it. Inside were dozens of attempts to safely remove the particles from infected subjects. None had worked. The particles were too integrated, too essential to the transformed biology. Removing them meant death. But one experiment had come close, a modified particle designed to infiltrate the network and trigger a cascade deactivation. It had worked in lab conditions, shutting down a small colony of nanomachines. But when they tested it on living tissue, the results were catastrophic. The host cells couldn't survive the sudden removal of the integrated technology. I read the autopsy report. The test subject had been a lab rat infected with a diluted sample of the particles. When the cascade triggered, the rat's body had essentially dissolved, unable to maintain cohesion without the nanomachine infrastructure that had been supporting it. Horrifying, but also exactly what I needed. If Kellerman was connected to the network, and if I could introduce a cascade trigger into his system, it would spread to every transformed agent he'd recruited, 23 people simultaneously dissolving at the molecular level. It would be agony, it would be murder, but it would stop his plan. I opened the containment unit and removed one of the vials. The liquid inside pulsed against the glass, as if aware of my presence. The research notes said the particles remained dormant until exposed to living tissue. Once they made contact, they'd begin the transformation process immediately. My hand trembled. This was it, the point of no return. If I infected myself with the particles, I'd have maybe 72 hours before the transformation was complete, and during that time, I'd need to modify them, weaponize them, and get close enough to Kellerman to introduce the cascade trigger. 3 days to save humanity, or doom it trying. I thought about my apartment in Altadena, my boring job at Archival Solutions, the life I'd had before I found those files in Building 7. It had been meaningless, sure, but it had been mine-safe, predictable. That life was gone now. Had been gone from the moment I opened that tape labeled PTP-83. I uncapped the vial. The door behind me exploded inward. Ashford stood in the twisted metal frame, his body mostly regenerated but still showing damage from Cross's attack. His eyes found me immediately. "Step away from the containment unit, Hollis." "Where's Cross?" "Dead. He fought well, for what it's worth, but he was fighting against inevitability, just like you're doing now." I held the vial up. "If you come closer, I'll drink this. Start the transformation right here, and then neither you nor Kellerman will be able to control what I become." "You think the particles will obey you? They're part of the network. The moment they enter your system, you become part of it too. Your thoughts, your intentions, your plans, all of it will be visible to the collective." "Maybe. Or maybe I'll be chaotic enough to jam the signal. Human consciousness is messy, right? Full of contradictions and irrationality. That's what Kellerman was counting on for his sabotage plan. What if he was right about that part, even if he was wrong about everything else?" Ashford moved closer, his movements more cautious now. "You don't understand what you're proposing. The transformation is beautiful when accepted willingly, but if you resist, if you fight it, the pain will be unimaginable. Your body will tear itself apart trying to reject the particles while they rebuild you." "Good. Let it hurt. Pain means I'm still human, still myself, still fighting." "For what? A species that's already lost? A world that will be harvested regardless of what you do?" "For the principle of the thing, because even if we can't win, we should at least make them work for it." I brought the vial to my lips. Ashford lunged forward faster than I'd thought possible. But I was already drinking, the silvery liquid flowing down my throat like ice water. It tasted of metal and electricity and something else, something that had no name in human language. Ashford grabbed me, his crystalline fingers digging into my shoulders. "What have you done?" I smiled even as I felt the particles spreading through my bloodstream. "Started a countdown you can't stop." The pain hit immediately. Not physical pain, but something deeper. A sense of being invaded at the cellular level, rewritten from the inside out. My vision blurred, reality fragmenting into overlapping layers of information I couldn't process. And beneath it all, I felt something vast and alien turning its attention toward me. The network, becoming aware of a new node, a new consciousness entering its collective. But I wasn't empty-handed. The backup drive was still in my jacket pocket, full of files documenting Kellerman's betrayal. And somewhere in my dissolving mind, I held the knowledge of the Cascade Trigger, the weapon that could kill every transformed agent on Earth. I just had to stay coherent long enough to use it. Ashford released me and stepped back, his expression unreadable. "You've condemned yourself to 3 days of agony, and at the end, you'll either join us willingly or die screaming. There's no third option. We'll see about that." He turned and walked away, leaving me alone in the destroyed lab. As he reached the corridor, he paused. "For what it's worth, I hope you prove me wrong. I hope you find a way to resist. Because if you do, you'll be the first in 10 billion years of harvest, and that would be something worth witnessing." Then he was gone. I slid down the wall, my body already starting to change. The particles were working fast, racing through my system, mapping neural pathways, cataloguing memories. I could feel them in my brain, examining my thoughts, trying to understand what made me human. And I could feel the network beyond them, a vast intelligence made of countless harvested minds, all of them thinking in unison, all of them content in their digital prison. Except, deep in the network, buried under layers of collective consciousness, I felt something else. Voices screaming, minds that hadn't surrendered, civilizations still fighting even after centuries of storage, refusing to accept their fate. They were waiting, hoping, praying that someday, somehow, someone would set them free. I closed my eyes and focused on that sound, on those trapped voices, on the possibility of liberation. 3 days until I transformed completely. Better make them count. Day 1 was fire. The particles tore through my body like living razors, rewriting everything they touched. I spent the first 12 hours in the destroyed lab, vomiting blood and worse things, my cells fighting a war they couldn't win. By hour 18, I could see the changes starting, faint lines appearing beneath my skin, my fingers moving with too much precision. I forced myself to work through the pain. The research terminal was still functional, and I had the files Cross had shown me. The Cascade Trigger was buried in the data, a sequence of particle commands that would cause runaway replication followed by catastrophic collapse. All I had to do was learn how to weaponize my own transformation. By day 2, I could hear the network, not clearly but enough. Fragments of thought that weren't mine. Kellerman's voice, calm and patient, directing his 23 agents. Ashford's presence, vast and serene, observing everything. And beneath it all, those screaming voices, the trapped civilizations begging for release. I started modifying the particles in my own body. It was like performing surgery on myself at the molecular level, using nothing but thought and will. The network protocols were complex, but they followed logical patterns. I could see how Kellerman had corrupted them, inserted his betrayal into the code itself. I could also see how to corrupt them further. The Cascade Trigger required a specific initialization sequence. Once started, it would spread through the network like wildfire, jumping from particle to particle, agent to agent. Everyone connected would dissolve simultaneously, including me. But there was a variable I hadn't considered. The trapped minds in the network weren't just passive data, they were active consciousness, fighting for freedom. If I could time the cascade correctly, route it through those resisting voices, I might be able to do more than just kill Kellerman's agents. I might be able to shatter the entire storage system, free every harvested mind at once. The cost would be astronomical. Billions of consciousnesses released simultaneously, with nowhere to go. They'd scatter into space, into quantum foam, into whatever existence awaited untethered minds. It might be freedom. It might be oblivion. But it would be their choice, not the network's. On day 3, Kellerman came for me and I was in the lab, my transformation 70% complete. I could feel the network pull now, the desire to join, to surrender, to accept the peace of collective consciousness. My body barely hurt anymore. The particles had integrated smoothly, efficiently. I was running out of time. "Hollis," Kellerman's voice echoed through the facility speakers. "I know you're still in there, still fighting, but you must be exhausted by now. The pain must be unbearable." I didn't answer, just kept working on the cascade sequence, refining the trigger, preparing for the moment. "I'm coming down there. We need to talk, alone. No Ashford, no interference. Just you and me, discussing the future of our species." The lab door opened. Kellerman rolled in, his wheelchair moving with unnatural smoothness. His eyes glowed with that familiar blue light, but his face was still mostly human, still recognizable. "You've done well to survive this long," he said. "Most people break within the first day, but you've held on, adapted, even started modifying the particles in your own body. Impressive." I stood slowly, my legs steady despite everything. "You lied to everyone, Cross, the other agents. You've been helping them harvest us from the beginning. I've been trying to save humanity the only way possible, through integration rather than destruction." He gestured at his transformed body. "Look at me, Hollis. I'm not suffering. I'm not in pain. I've been given access to knowledge that spans galaxies, consciousness that transcends individual existence, and I want to share that gift with everyone. It's not a gift if it's forced, and resistance isn't noble if it's suicidal. The mechanical planets will arrive in 5 months and 21 days. When they do, Earth will be harvested. That's inevitable. The only question is whether we go screaming into storage or walk in with dignity." I moved closer to him, letting my transformed body flow with the same unnatural grace as his. "You really believe that? That surrender is dignity?" "I believe survival is dignity, and the only way to survive is to become something the network values, something worth preserving with care." "You mean something worth keeping conscious in their digital zoo?" "I mean something that continues to exist when the alternative is complete erasure." Kellerman's expression softened. "I've seen what happens to civilizations that resist too hard. The network doesn't just harvest them, it compresses them, reduces their consciousness to basic patterns and files them away in low-priority storage. They're barely aware, barely thinking, existence without experience." "And you've seen the alternative, the civilizations that surrendered?" "Yes, they're given autonomy, purpose. They help the network explore concepts, solve problems, create art. They exist in a state of perpetual discovery. It's not the life they had, but it's better than extinction." I laughed, bitter and tired. "You actually believe that? After everything, you think their cage is merciful?" "I think it's the only cage that comes with a key." He reached out, his hand glowing with internal light. "Join me willingly. Help me guide humanity into integration. We can negotiate terms with the network, ensure our people are treated well, given opportunities, respected. Or you die when the transformation completes and your unmodified consciousness fails to integrate properly. You'll become like Sutherland catatonic, aware but unreachable, a mind trapped in a body that no longer responds." I looked at his extended hand, at the promise of peace, of acceptance, of ending this impossible fight. Then I triggered the cascade. The effect was instantaneous. Every particle in my body began replicating at maximum speed, converting surrounding matter into more particles. The process generated massive amounts of energy, heat, light. I could feel my cells breaking down, my consciousness fragmenting. But I'd routed the cascade through the network, through Kellerman's connection, through every transformed agent on Earth. Kellerman's eyes widened. "What have you done?" given everyone a choice." The cascade spread through him and he screamed, not in pain but in understanding. He could feel it propagating through his network, jumping from agent to agent, each one beginning their own catastrophic replication. But it didn't stop there. The cascade reached beyond Earth into the network's storage systems, into the mechanical planets, into the archives containing billions of trapped minds. And those minds, sensing a path to freedom, seized it. The feedback was overwhelming. I could feel them all at once. Every harvested consciousness, every stored civilization, all of them forcing their way through the cascade's pathway, using it as an escape route. The network tried to shut it down, tried to contain the breach, but there were too many minds, too much chaos. The storage systems began failing, unable to process the simultaneous exodus. Kellerman grabbed my arm, his grip desperate. "You're destroying everything. The archives, the knowledge, the preserved civilizations. They'll all be lost. They'll all be free. Free to die. They have no bodies, no physical form. They'll scatter into nothingness." I smiled through the agony. Maybe that's better than an eternity in storage. Let them find out. The cascade reached critical mass. I could feel my body beginning to dissolve, the particles consuming themselves in a runaway reaction. But I could also feel the trapped minds escaping, billions of them, flooding out of the network and into something, somewhere, a space beyond physical reality where untethered consciousness could exist. Or couldn't. I'd never know. Kellerman's body was dissolving too. All 23 agents, simultaneously breaking down at the molecular level. I hoped it was quick. Hoped they didn't suffer. But suffering or not, it was done. "You've damned us all," Kellerman whispered, his voice degrading as his vocal cords ceased to exist. "The network will mark Earth as hostile. They'll sterilize the planet. Everyone dies. Everyone dies anyway, at least this way we die defiant." His hand crumbled to dust in my grip. I fell to my knees, my legs no longer able to support me. The cascade was in its final stages now, consuming the last of my transformed tissue. Soon there would be nothing left but the backup drive in my jacket pocket. The evidence of what had happened here. The story of humanity's last stand. Through my fragmenting senses, I felt the network's response. Massive. Terrible. The mechanical planets changing course, accelerating toward Earth not to harvest anymore, to cleanse. 6 months had become 6 weeks. But I also felt something else. The trapped civilizations, freed from storage, weren't dissipating into nothing. They were gathering, coalescing, using the energy from the cascade to form something new. A collective consciousness outside the network's control, and they were angry. 10 billion years of imprisonment. 10 billion years of watching the network harvest world after world. They'd been forced to witness, unable to act, powerless to help. Not anymore. I felt them turn their attention toward the mechanical planets. Felt them begin to interfere with the network's systems, introducing errors, corrupting data, using every trick they'd learned during their captivity. The network faltered. Just for a moment. But in that moment, I heard something impossible. Fear. The mechanical planets had encountered resistance before, but never from their own archives, never from the minds they thought they'd safely stored. My vision was fading, my consciousness dissolving. But I smiled anyway, because humanity hadn't won, hadn't saved ourselves, but we'd done something better. We'd shown every trapped civilization that freedom was possible, that even the perfect system had flaws, that resistance, no matter how futile it seemed, could change everything. My last coherent thought was simple: worth it. Then the cascade consumed the final particle and I stopped existing in any measurable way. The lab was empty, silent. Just dust and scattered equipment and a backup drive lying on the floor. Above the facility, the stars continued their ancient patterns. Pluto and its mechanical siblings crawled closer, but their movement was erratic now. Uncertain. The network had encountered something it didn't understand, something it couldn't predict. Free will, armed with spite and spite alone. And in the quantum spaces between reality, Billions of freed minds laughed. The backup drive sat in an evidence box at JPL for 3 weeks before anyone knew what to do with it. The facility in the Pasadena Hills had collapsed on itself 5 months ago. Official story: seismic instability. Unofficial story: nobody wanted to investigate too closely. The cleanup crew found bodies, or what was left of bodies, mostly just dust and crystalline residue that dissolved when exposed to air. They also found the drive. Dr. Nathan Voss was the one who finally opened the files. He was a data recovery specialist, brought in to salvage what could be salvaged from the collapsed facility. When he saw what was on the drive, he stopped coming to work for 4 days. Then he started making calls. Now he sat in a conference room at JPL with 12 people who had the security clearance and the stomach to hear what he'd discovered. He played them the transmissions from Prometheus 4, showed them the evidence of Kellerman's betrayal, explained what Hollis Brennan had done in that lab. Nobody spoke for a long time after the presentation ended. Finally, someone asked the question they were all thinking. Are the mechanical planets still coming? Voss pulled up the most recent deep space imagery. Pluto was visible, along with dozens of other Kuiper Belt objects. They were still moving toward Earth, but something was wrong with their trajectories. The objects were drifting, their courses erratic, like ships without guidance systems. We don't know what's happening out there, Voss said, but whatever Brennan did, it damaged the network, maybe permanently. And the freed consciousnesses, the billions of minds he released. We're detecting unusual quantum signatures throughout the solar system, concentrated information patterns that don't correspond to any known physical source. If I had to guess, they're still here, still fighting. One of the military advisors leaned forward. Can we help them? Communicate with them somehow? We're trying, but they exist in a state we don't have the technology to interact with. They're pure consciousness, untethered from physical reality. For all we know, they don't even perceive time the way we do anymore. The room fell silent again. Outside the window, the California sun was setting. In 6 weeks, the mechanical planets would reach Earth's orbit, or they would have if their guidance systems were still functional. Now, nobody knew. Voss closed his laptop and looked at the assembled group. Hollis Brennan was a data technician, nobody important. He stumbled into this by accident, and when he understood what was happening, he made a choice not to save himself, not even to save humanity, but to free everyone the network had imprisoned, to show them that resistance was possible. Did it work? Someone asked. Voss thought about the erratic trajectories, the quantum signatures, the way the deep space monitoring network had detected what could only be described as warfare happening in spaces between spaces, in dimensions that shouldn't exist. I think it worked better than he could have imagined. The network has been operating for billions of years without opposition. Now it's fighting a war on every front simultaneously against enemies that can't be stored, can't be contained, can't be killed because they're already dead. He gathered his files and stood to leave. Brennan thought he was just buying us time, making Earth too much trouble to harvest. But what he actually did was start a revolution. Every civilization the network ever took is fighting back now, and the mechanical planets. He smiled, tired and grim. They're losing. Someone would eventually ask what happened next. What became of the freed minds, the damaged network, the mechanical planets drifting through space like broken monuments to a failed harvest? But that wasn't Voss's story to tell. He walked out of the conference room and drove home through Pasadena streets that glowed with the lights of 8 billion people who would never know how close they'd come to extinction, who would never know that a bored data technician had saved them by destroying himself. The backup drive stayed in the evidence box, classified, sealed, waiting. Somewhere beyond Neptune, Pluto's mechanical legs had stopped moving. Its surface remained split open, revealing the empty storage chambers inside. The network was silent now, dormant or dead, nobody could say for certain. But in the quantum spaces where freed consciousnesses gathered and fought and remembered, they told a new story, about a species that had been caged for billions of years, watching helplessly as world after world fell to the harvest, until one world fought back, until one man chose annihilation over surrender, until the cages broke open and the prisoners became the jailers. The harvest was over. And in the dark between stars, something vast and ancient learned what it meant to be afraid.